Welcome, fans, to another live edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast on the Hannibal TV on YouTube. And today I'm very pleased to welcome a man whose career I've obviously followed as a very big fan of ECW and other locations. He definitely has an extensive career to talk about. I know you fans have sent in a lot of questions for him. We're going to try and get to all of that in the time frame allotted. And I would be speaking about none other than ECW original, the enforcer, CW Anderson. CW, thank you for coming on today, sir.
Jack, thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to it.
I think it's a good starting point that when we're doing a in-depth career profile to talk about when it was that you were growing up. I know you were a fan of the business, but who influenced you and what? I know you're in the Carolinas, so obviously Jim Crockett Promotions, but what exactly in terms of companies and wrestlers really solidified that fandom in you?
Actually, growing up, I didn't like professional wrestling at all. I
Okay.
didn't like it. My little brother, is the one that got me into it. He watched it all the time. Again, like you said, I'm in the Carolinas here. I live east of Raleigh, North Carolina, still do. And my brother watched it all the time as we were growing up because we only got like three channels. So NWA was hot with us. So every Saturday it would come on TV. Now I was a big Saturday Night Live fan, didn't care nothing for wrestling, and I was the baseball guy. So one Saturday morning, he sat down and was like, "Would you just watch this one match with me? Just one show, one match. If you don't like it, you ain't never got to watch it again. Just watch one match with me." And I said, "Yeah, no problem." He's 3 years younger than I. So I sat down with him. We watched it, and it happened to be the Rock and Roll Express versus the Russians. And it was Uncle Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev. Um, it was the day that Rock and Roll came in and took the belts off the Russians. That match is on YouTube. It was July 1985, I think it was, somewhere around that time. So I'm 12, 13, 14 at the time, and watched that one match. And it was where Ricky Morton victory rolled Ivan, and they beat him for the belts. And remember the crowd going crazy. It just came up on my Facebook feed the other day, and I remember that feeling because I remember my brother and I were jumping around, little kids, because the Americans had just beat the Russians. From that moment on, I was hooked. Um, Again, me being a baseball guy, I was a baseball standout in my area, so baseball was my passion. And there was a indie guy that lived close to us that started this little backyard federation. Now, nothing to the extent of what the backyard federations are with the crazy death matches and things like that. The guy actually had a ring. It was in one of my friend's backyard, and he just did some training and had put little matches on. That was like I was like 16, 17 at the time, so I only did a few. And then my baseball coach made me quit because I had a future in baseball. He didn't want me getting hurt. And then once baseball went to the wayside, and when I was in my early 20s, I got back into it because I still watched it, but the ones that I was, my idols, the ones I was addicted to was the Midnight Express and Bobby Eaton. To me, Bobby Eaton is the GOAT. There's two on my Mount Rushmore. One's Arn Anderson and the other's Bobby Eaton. And I wanted to be Bobby Eaton when I got into wrestling. So that's when I got into it. I kind of patterned and mimicked Bobby because I was such a mark for him, which today I still am, even though he's not with us. I'm still a mark for Bobby.
Mm-hmm. Well, what an excellent choice there. In terms of your and again, I'll be asking you information that's out there and see if you can authorize it or discount it. But you apparently, when you started, allegedly were untrained, so to speak,
Yes.
and just started working. I found that fascinating. Could you talk about that?
When I got back into it, uh, there was a local school down the road from us in a town called Smithfield where the indie guys worked out at. And we never really had a trainer. There was an indie guy there that had been in the business a little bit longer that was there. He was a little more experienced. But as far as going to a school where you were just being trained like guys are today, that wasn't happening. We just kind of got in the ring and ran through moves. I wasn't taught psychology or anything like that. It was a on the job training, so to speak. Um, so I started December 4th of 1993 was my basically first match in a building. And the guy put me under a hood, and this was around the Razor Ramon time, if I remember correctly, because he called me El Chico. So I was under a hood. He made me put a toothpick in. I had no idea what I was doing and had no, because I was being basically Razor Ramon, and here I am, this white guy. So, that was my first match, December 4th, and with no official training, that going through a training school, had no idea what I was doing. And that was the same night that I got set one of the became an Anderson that night.
Yeah, which is a question that one of the fans sent that I think we'll ask at this point in time. They wanted to know exactly how you became an Anderson, and they were also trying to get some information about which, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't entirely positive in terms of your interactions with Ole Anderson, the late great Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that night there was a guy running as a tag team. It was Pat and Rocky Anderson. Um, Pat was trained by the reason I call him, you hear him earlier call Uncle Ivan Koloff, because that's what everybody referred to him that got trained by him was Uncle Ivan. So my partner was trained by Ivan. So I would go to Ivan's school every now and then and work out with those guys. So when I sat down that night with Pat, because he wanted to meet with me, the guy Rocky was retiring. Um, and Pat plain out asked me, I had a goatee at the time and I had a lot more hair. I looked more like Big Boss Man than I did in Anderson. And he asked me, he said he was looking for a tag team partner to run up and down the East Coast and the Carolinas with. Would I be interested in becoming an Anderson and tagging with him? Sure. I mean, I had no idea what I was going to do in my wrestling career, so it sounded great. He said, I just got to come up with a 3-letter name, his name being Pat, then there was Ole and Arn, so work that out. I couldn't job the name out. I had to respect it as an Anderson. So for a couple weeks, I tried to come up with a 3-letter name. I come up with Ike and Cal. That was my 2 big hits. And the guy that was a manager on the Independents, who was my baseball coach since I was little, his name was Randy Driver. I was talking to him, and I said, Mr. Randy, I can't come up with anything. I said, I don't know what I'm going to call myself as an Anderson. He said, I just use your initials, call you CW, because my real name is Chris Wright. So that's kind of how it stuck. And that's how I started as an Anderson, running with Pat up and down the Carolinas. As that progressed, it led into me training people to the power plant, to ECW, the whole nine, which we'll get into. But the time I met Ole, because I never really met Arn. I never met Arn when I was at the power plant. I never got any, introduction with him. And once I got to the power plant, I was petrified of meeting him because I didn't get permission from Arn. So I didn't know how Arn was going to take me. But the one time I did meet Ole, High Spots set that meeting up. I just come back from Japan. And I was on a show. Ole was there, and he was had his book. That's when Ole's book come out. So he was peddling his book, and it didn't go well. Ole didn't want to do anything in the ring with me. He didn't want to get in the ring and do the presentation of giving me the thumbs up or down on becoming an Anderson. And he kind of sat at his table. And when I first met him, I introduced myself. I said, hello, sir. I said, my name is Chris Wright. I'm the one that works as CW Anderson. He looks at me and goes, so you're the other Anderson? I went, yes, sir. That's me. By that time, I want to say it was Caprice Coleman that came up and hugged me. And when I did that, Ole's response was, Jesus Christ, 25 years in this business, now everybody's turned into faggots, was his exact words to me and Caprice Coleman for just giving the bro hug. He said something shitty to my girlfriend at the time because she introduced herself as CW's girlfriend, and he's like, I don't give a shit, buy my book, was his exact words. So it wasn't a positive meeting with Ole. And so that was the only interaction I ever had with them, which was, of course, not a good one. And it left a lasting impression on me. Um, and I had really no use for him after that. Cut a promo on him backstage for a prop for high spots, and didn't care anything about him. Once he passed away, and then again we'll get into the stuff with me tagging with Brock Anderson, Orange Son. I started watching more Ole stuff because now I have become Ole. I'm just not as pissed off to the world as he was.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. He was certainly a polarizing figure. I've heard that recounted before, and it always kind of made me shake my head, considering he was brought in as an Anderson as well. But you mentioned the power plant. We're going to kind of jump up the time frame a little bit. I had read that you were brought in to train there, and actually was offered a contract, but allegedly turned it down. And it would seem that you would be a natural fit for WCW, given the Carolinas, the history of the Andersons. What's the story behind that?
The the train, I was never really brought in to train. I actually trained a guy that ended up being Raven's sign guy, Lodi. I trained Lodi. Lodi and I are great friends to the day. Actually, Lodi was the one that performed the service at my wedding a few months ago. So once Lodi got there, he and his tag team partner, Curtis White, who did a little bit of WCW stuff at the end as Toad with PG-13. Once they got there and got to the power plant, got through the tryout, and then Lodi got a spot with Raven, they messaged me one day or called me one day, and Lodi goes, CW, you're just spinning your wheels in here in the Carolinas. Just, he kind of gave me the format of what they do at the power plant, and I trained for 3 months and went and tried out, passed that. And then once I went back and started learning under Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker, Pez Watley, and Mike Winter, they basically took all the raw stuff that I knew from the independents, because again, never formally trained. And it wasn't until I got to the power plant that I was trained to form, Sarge and Pez and Mike took all that stuff and made it into the guy that got a job at ECW. Now, once I started going there, I started working with guys, because there would be 3 rings. One ring every time I was there was getting painted. The Nitro canvas or the Thunder canvas was getting painted in one ring. Sarge would be working out with certain guys in the other ring. And so that would have left the rest of the class to be in one ring. And me and Toad would work out with some of the guys and teach them things, the Natural Born Thrillers, Elix Skipper, Lash LaRue, Mike Sanders, all great guys that I think the world of. I would work out with them. And then the 6-figure contract was kind of made up by Joey and Paul. Once I got to ECW, I remember Joey saying that I was offered a 6-figure contract. I was never offered anything. I paid my $250 deposit to try out. I paid $1,000 to get back into the school, because you had to pay $3,000 for the full class. So I paid $1,000 just to get back in there, but I never paid anything after that. And after about 1.5 years is when the thing happened with JJ Dillon and Paul Orndorff, and I got depressed and pissed off about what they told me, and then which led to my stuff at getting a tryout at ECW. So the 6-figure contract was never a thing, but I did train some of the guys there. Just here and there. I wasn't a full-fledged trainer. Just worked out with them and showing them things, because I'd been in the business since '93. So I was showing them things that I had learned and put into, because Toad and I would usually wrestle each other on the weekend. We'd video it, bring it back. Everybody would sit down and watch it, and Sarge would critique it. And then we'd go out the next week and fix those critiques. There was one time he said we locked up too many times in a match and ran the ropes too much. So the next match, we told a story, which if you know in the business, you know what telling a story is. Never locked up and never run the ropes, and then a 25-minute match and told a story just to see if we could actually do it. So it was things like that. That's how I learned at the power plant.
In looking back in hindsight, there's been a lot of information about the approach of the power plant. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Sarge and got his full perspective on it. Do you think that given the production that the power plant made in terms of great wrestlers, do you think they were on the right track there, or the criticisms that you hear were they bona fide too in terms of your experience being too harsh on guys, being overly critical as you touched on? What's your thoughts on that concept in general?
My frame of mind with stuff like that is a little bit different. Everybody said the tryouts were too much. They were hard. They were hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And somebody told me, I even joke about this, that they said, we're going to pay you millions of dollars a year to wrestle, but you just got to go back through those 3 days of hell again. No, thank you. I'll go work at McDonald's or somewhere. I'm not doing that. I'm okay. Because it was hard. 30 something people started the first day of my tryout. By the end of class, there was 5 of us the first day, and 4 of us made it. It was just to get rid of the armchair quarterbacks that said they could do it. So that stuff didn't bother me. Was it a little unorganized? Yes. The guy that ran it, Jody Hamilton, he never really stepped out of his office. It was all pretty much Sarge and Pez and Mike Winter, and they did the best they could. Phenomenal minds and great training. And the guys that would show up and wanted to learn, from the names I listed before, on to like Johnny Swinger, who I met at the time from there. You can't learn enough from Sarge like that because he's such a great mind. But too many people say it was just too much and too hard for the tryouts. It should be a lot easier. And I like them, to be honest with you. I ain't gonna say I would like them doing them, but I like that he weeded out the people that see who really had the heart for this business.
Yeah, makes sense. Quite a contrast to the current performance center approach, which seems to be cookie cutter, etc. But one of the interesting parts of your history prior to ECW, which we'll touch on, is you were in a team when you defeated the Fantastics for the NWA World Title, and one of the fans wanted to know what that experience was like in terms of being the tag team champion of the NWA at the time, and then Bobby and Jackie and the history that they have in the business as well.
I loved it. I was still new into the business, so the greenness hadn't worn off on me yet. So I didn't know the implications of it. And this one, NWA was trying to make a comeback. They were always trying to make a comeback so many years. And being able to say that I'm officially an NWA World Tag Team Champion with the Rock and Roll Expresses, the Four Horsemen, the Midnight Expresses, the Fantastic guys like that. I love that. And being able to work with Jackie and Bobby, that was a great honor as well, just because of who they are in this business. So things like that is another little hang my hat on notch, but just a great honor to be able to consider an NWA World Tag Team Champion, especially from where I come from in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you come to sign with ECW in the late 90s? And I wanted to ask you, going in, did you have expectations in terms of your spot or where you would fit into that? And did you have any idea that you would be, pretty significantly featured in those years that you were there?
For that, not a clue. I had no idea what was going to happen. It was a day-by-day basis. I actually never really signed with them. My contract was coming at Living Dangerously after my I Quit match, because I was supposed to win the TV belt at Living Dangerously, and my contract was going to be signed. I was on a nightly basis. In the beginning, up until like the first 6-7 months, I was making $75 a night. That's what Paul paid me. And I was having to drive everywhere. No reimbursements, nothing like that. I footed my own bill as far as gas, hotel, the whole nine. And in the beginning, we were working 4 nights a week. And if you didn't work, you didn't get paid. And most of those loops in the beginning, I'd only work one time out of the four nights. So $75 driving everywhere. In my first year at ECW, I lost $21,000. That's how I claimed it on my taxes. But how I got my job there was the the guy I was telling you about, Curtis White, Toad, got a tryout. And it was from Lodi through Raven through Dreamer. And it was in Georgia. Toad and I worked the Public Enemy the night before on the independent show in South Carolina. And Toad literally drugged me down there. I didn't want to go. I'm such an introvert and so shy and nervous about everything that I didn't want to go. And because I'd be so, I don't know, embarrassment or whatever it was, but I didn't want to do it. So he drugged me down there. He said, look, Karina's down there. You and Karina are good friends. Pat Kenny's down there. Simon Diamond, y'all are good friends. Just come hang out, say hello, do a little politicking. If you can't get in the ring, at least you can show your face. So I went with him begrudgingly. So I forgot where we were at in Georgia, but it might have been like Rome. He got in, did his tryout, and he was working out with Angel from the Baldies. And I was around the ring talking to Simon and Swinger. And I got to mention Angel anyway, put him over.
He said he wanted to know when we were doing this interview so he could come on and give you shit. My broadcast partner on Shooting from the Hip podcast. Yes.
I wouldn't expect anything less from him. But so Toad did the tryout. Curtis did the tryout with Angel. It was about 5 minutes. Nova was running it. Everybody was around the ring. About that time when they got done, Nova leaned out and looked at me and he's like, Chris, do you have your gear? I was like, yeah, it's in the car. He said, well, run and get it. So I ran, got my gear, put it on, got in the ring. He put me in there with Simon. We did a little 5-minute deal. I got done. Nova told me about my timing. He said, you have immaculate timing in the ring. I got out. I hear somebody in the crowd or over in the seats yell at Bill Alfonso, Fonzie, get the ball guy back in the ring. Fonzie looks at me and goes, Daddy, he wants you back in the ring. And I'm like, who? It was Paul Heyman. He was sitting in the crowd with the Dudleys and Taz watching the workouts. So I got back in and they threw guys at me for like the next hour, just running guys at me, running through spots, doing different things. About the time the doors got ready to open, which was a normal thing at ECW, we all worked out before the show. I go in the back in the bathroom. And I remember that I was bumping myself so hard and hitting the turnbuckles and ropes that I was spitting up blood. So I remember leaning over, spitting up blood, and I got the vision of that door swinging open, and I look over, and it's classic Paul Heyman, black hat, trench coat. He walks up to me, sticks his hand out, and says, hey, I'm Paul Heyman. It's nice to meet you. I said, hey, Paul. I said, my name is Chris Wright. It's an honor to meet you, sir. He said, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where you wrestling at? Go into, things like that. So I told him I was at the power plant. I've been wrestling X amount of years. He says, are you under contract with the power plant? I said, no, sir. They told me I really didn't have what it take to make it at their company. He said, well, what's your wrestling name? I said, C.W. Anderson. He goes, I knew it. He says, you look like Arn. You have the left punch like Arn, the spine buster. He said, Chris, don't leave tonight before I speak to you. I said, yes, sir. I said, thank you again. He said, you're more than welcome to hang out in the back. So I did. Show's kind of getting ready to start. I'm mingling in the back, and Jim Molyneux comes up to me and says, are you CW? I said, yes, sir. He said, Paul wants to talk to you in the locker room. So I walk back there, and he's sitting there with Vito LaGrassa, Danny Doran, and Roadkill, introduces me to him, says, you're tagging with Vito. You guys are third match. Welcome to ECW. And that's how I got my job.
Wow, what a story that is. Did you hear, or did you have any preconceived notions about Paul Lee at the time, or was there any trepidation when you went there, or did that kind of lay your mind at ease?
I didn't know Paul. You just knew him from what you saw on TV. I had no idea what to expect. Watching ECW, because I was a fan of ECW. That was the very first time that my parents got satellite, because we didn't get satellite till I was in my early 20s, or cable. We didn't get cable. It was a satellite. It was that big one that was 40 feet up in the air. ECW was the first wrestling thing I saw outside of NWA, WWF, and Texas, or World Class. ECW, it was ECW. So I became a fan. Seeing what they did in the ring and the stories, I was petrified being in that locker room with New Jack, Taz, the Baldies, the Dudleys, everybody. I was scared to death. So I would sit in my corner and I wouldn't say a word, wouldn't speak, wouldn't even put my boots on at shows until they told me I was wrestling. That was the part that I was really apprehensive about. I did hear in the beginning I was the flavor of the month for Paul because of how he found me. And, I remember going over in my very first match there. My second match was my first singles because that just didn't happen. You didn't win in the beginning with ECW. You always lost. And Paul put me on my first one, which that had consequences later that night. But as far as what to expect from Paul, I had no idea.
Consequences in terms of heat?
Yes, from Bubba and Taz. Bubba, from what people had told me, was when I went over, Bubba and Taz rushed to Paul, said something to the effect of, "Why did you put this kid over? He's supposed to lose." So I had to do a promo that night with the Dudleys. And I remember the Dudleys switching chairs with Balls Mahoney and give him one of the old style steel chairs that was a lot thicker than the metal ones they use now. And it was the very first promo. I remember Balls coming up to me and I'm supposed to say something like, "Oh, Balls, you're crazy." He goes, "I'm crazy, right?" And cracks me over the head. That was my introduction. And it was a kind of a receipt or little for going over in that match, which is fine. It's a little hazing, whatever they want to call it, but I was okay with that. Is what it took.
When you you mentioned Big Vito, you were teaming with him and had some really tremendous matches against Doring and Roadkill. But one of the ECW originals that folks don't really talk about much is Bill Wiles, and you team with him quite a bit, and even got the New Dangerous Alliance moniker. Were you ever in the mix there with him for the tag title picture? What was the whole story with your team with Bill?
The tag belts were supposed to be coming. That was one of the things we were put together as a joke, as a rib on the Dangerous Alliance, and then we started getting over as a good tag team. They would at the end, before the show would start, Tommy would come around and you didn't know who you were working. And Tommy would go, tonight, CW, like my first tag team partners on a regular was Angel. Angel and I would tag on several shows. And then it got to Bill. He put me and Bill together one night, and Bill and I clicked just like that. I mean, we had amazing chemistry. And then it got to the point where Bill and I would sit beside each other and was hoping that Tommy would see us and put us against Danny and Roadkill or Chetty and Nova or Chetty and Kid Cash, Nova, Kid Cash, one of those guys. And then we started teaming on a regular. We had a dark match at, was it November to Remember? Anarchy? It was in Chicago. It might have been Anarchy Rules. It was the night that Taz dropped the belt to Mike Awesome. So we did the dark match against Danny and Roadkill with Miss Congeniality, Lita, that night. And it started gaining momentum. And then when the Dudleys left, they were trying to find something to do with Lou, the sign guy Dudley. And in my travel clique was Louis Dangerously, Steve Corino, Jack Victory, myself, Dreamer, and Francine. And I remember sitting at the Dungeon one night. The Dungeon's a bar and a hotel in Atlanta. And Lou and I was sitting there talking. And I was like, what do you want to do now that the Dudleys are gone? He's like, "I want to manage you." And I was like, "Yeah, hell, I'm all for that," because Lou and I were close. And then it was Tommy and Paul's idea to do a rib on the Dangerous Alliance because in a hat and Lou talking, he looked just like Paul. And then, I was doing the Anderson and gimmick and, made Bill Beautiful Billy Wiles, and it just started clicking and it took off. Like I said, we were put together as a joke, and then we started getting over as a really good tag team. We were actually ranked one time in the wrestling magazine as one of the top 10 tag teams in the world.
Yep.
And then once Lance Storm left, Paul told Tommy that it was time to make me, it was time to push me. So they started breaking me away and putting me as a singles guy and starting, to elevate me.
That's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about. You've had a heck of a singles and a tag career. What did you feel most adept at, or what did you prefer?
Tagging. I love tag team wrestling. I've always had a knack for it, the psychology, because to me it's more of a psychology than singles wrestling. I don't mind either. Plus, you know, the older I get now, or even then, I like tagging because you get to rest a little bit. So
Yeah.
that was one of the pluses of tagging. But I just enjoy the psychology and the stories that tag team made, because now tag teams aren't what they used to be. You used to have dedicated tag teams, guys. That's all they did, and now you don't. You have two guys thrown together, can call them a tag team. So that's what I always liked. And I had it with Bill, and then when Steve Corino and I were tagging in Japan, and Simon Diamond and I were tagging, I always loved doing that stuff. I just like tagging better.
Yeah, and in my opinion, the business is not the better for it, because you can't get better, as you touched on, psychology and really good storytelling in tag team wrestling. But speaking of tag team wrestling, a fan sent this question in, wanting to know about your experience working with a very hardcore tag team. Both, unfortunately, have left us. That would be Balls Mahoney and Axel Rotten. You had some real barn burners with them.
Yeah, I did. My very first time working with them was in Buffalo, New York, and I won't never forget. It was a TV, and Balls and Axel come out of a meeting, and Balls looks at me and slaps me on the back of the neck, or the shoulder, and says, "CW, it's you and Bill against me and Axel tonight. You're taking total decapitation." I went, what the hell is that? I had no clue. And Steve says, "Oh, it's a chair shot to the back and chair shot to the head." So immediately I go into panic mode because I'm scared to death. I never worked with Bill or with Balls and Axel, so I just know what they did on TV, and I'm like, I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm going to get hurt. I'm done. And Steve told me, he said, when I took the chair shot from Balls at the pay-per-view, he said, I got up from the super kick and I was holding my jaw. He said, so hold that, and that helped with the compression of getting hit from the chair. So on the outside, I'm CW Anderson, badass, whatever you want to call it. On the inside, I'm a little 12-year-old kid that's scared to death because I never worked with him. But once I got in the ring with them and started rolling around with them, I was like, shit, they're easy. They were great to work with. They took care of you. They were so over, you didn't really have to do a lot. Now the chair shots hurt like hell. They sucked. But other than that, man, I loved working with Balls and Axel. Worked a lot with them. Bill and I worked the whole program with them all over, ECW and up and down in the States. So I enjoyed working with those guys and built a close friendship with them. Tragic how both of them went out, the ways they went out. I was a little disappointed the way Axel went out because he was telling everybody he was clean. So that kind of hurt. And Balls was another one. The way he passed away, it was sad to see the ways they went. But those guys lived a hard life and they lived it on the edge. But to answer the guy's question, man, they were amazing to work with. One of my funnier things with them was we're in Boston one night doing a hardcore match, and I'm trying to get color, and I can't do it. No matter how many times I'm gigging, nothing would come out. And Axel looks at me after the second time and goes, "You got one more time, and then I'm getting it for you." Shit, it was almost like I did the mass transit where I just did that to myself to get color because I'm not going to let Axel get it for me.
Yeah. Well, those matches, if fans aren't familiar with them, do yourself a favor and check those out, because they really stand up to this day. Wanted to know your thoughts during the time frame when ECW secured the TV deal with the Nashville network, and there was a lot of positivity at the start because ECW was becoming, too big not to grow. And that was a necessary first step to become, a major national promotion, or the next logical step. What were your thoughts and your reminiscences of the locker room when that happened? And what were the first sort of indicators that you remember that it was really not the best situation?
We were all excited. It was we were getting off of quote unquote the hardcore TV, the smaller cable channels, and becoming mainstream. So we were all excited. Everybody was going to become more famous, where all the money was going to come in. And as things started looking up. So there was a positive vibe going around the locker room. And then it got to the point where we were realizing, I think what was hitting us was they weren't promoting us. The only time they promoted our show was during our show. So that started being a huge letdown. And then there were all these restrictions that they were putting on us, things we couldn't do, couldn't say. So we were jumping through so many hoops, and then come to find out, like you said, it was only a precursor as a tester for WWE. So it went from immediately like everybody's excited to it's the same old shit, same old thing again, back to TV again. Of course, I think it was only on that show maybe once or twice. Most of the time I was featured on hardcore TV because I hadn't elevated myself to that point yet. So that's kind of what the feelings going around the locker room was with it.
Speaking of TV exposure, I think it was on TNN actually that you had, a world television title shot against RVD during a period of time that the TV title arguably, due to how hot RVD was, meant more than the world title or certainly had its own prestige. Wanted to know what that memories of that match for you, and I know you worked RVD a number of times, just working with him in general, and thoughts on his longevity in the business to this day.
RVD is awesome, and you'll probably hear that the rest of this thing. Anything I say about ECW, the ECW family, but that first night was Chicago. My very first match with him, scared to death because I remember Tommy coming up to me and goes, "C-Dub, you got Rob tonight," and I went, "Excuse me?" He goes, "Yeah, you got a title shot against RVD." And Paul told me that if you do good in this match, you're going to go places in this company. But if not, you don't do well. That's classic Tommy. I mean, his mannerism. So again, it put me scared to death. Like, shit, this is my make it or break it. So I go out there with Rob. Never worked with him before, and he and I, it was, like I said, in Chicago. He and I had a hell of a match, a very good match. And I remember coming in the back, and Paul was the first one, and he said, "I knew you would knock this out of the park," and give me like a big hug. So that was a huge boost for me in confidence, because it wasn't but a few months earlier that I worked with Jerry Lynn and fumbled the ball. Well, I had about 3 or 4 screw ups, and Paul didn't think I was ready for the next step. He even said something to Jerry about it. And Jerry's response was, "Yes, CW screwed up a couple of times, or he made a few mistakes, but if you give him a chance, he's going to be the biggest heel in this company." And then it got to the point where I remember one night, Paul sat every one of us down and said I was the best heel in wrestling, not ECW, but the best heel in wrestling. He told that in front of everybody. But after that night with Rob, I loved working with him. He was so over, so easy to work with. He and I had great chemistry. The last time I worked with him was in Canada in front of like 6,000 people. And I've told this before, there's a 45-minute match, and 25 minutes of the match was me standing there while he was doing RVD and the people were coming with it. It never got tired. 25 minutes of him doing that, and we hadn't even locked up yet. So that's what, a few of my things, and his longevity. It's because Rob takes care of himself. Rob was stretching before the matches all the time. He's like Gumby, man. He was so flexible. So that's one of the things I think that kept to his longevity.
To this day, fans speak about and historians speak about the atmosphere in the ECW arena on that corner of Swanson and Rittner. And I'm very fortunate back in the day to have actually gone to original ECW events there. I know what the fans were like there. When you started working there, did that enter into your mind that, boy, if I make a mistake or whatever, the fans are going to crap on me? Or did that influence how you approached your match at all? And do you have any noteworthy memories of working in the converted bingo hall?
Yeah, every time I went out there, it was make sure your A game's on point, because they were going to let you know. And I remember my very first one was tagging with Vito against Danny and Roadkill, and some of my students drove up to watch me wrestle, and they were hearing from fans in there that when it was done, people were saying this CW Anderson is never going to make it in ECW. He won't last. And it went from that to one of the last times I was there getting a standing ovation from the fans for my match. I loved working there, scared working there because of how they are, but they made you be on point. It's just like working in front of a Japanese crowd. You had to be on point every night. Got a standing O from him the night I worked Super Crazy, and he beat me to move to the television title. One of my moments there was my Bobby Eaton moment, where the very first time I did a live promo, and I was not good on in the camera talking, scared. I was, like I said, I'm very much of an introvert, so I was scared to death. And my very first live promo was ECW Arena, and that was the night Simon and Swinger turned on their little entourage. Then we beat up Danny and Roadkill, and then Bobby Eaton makes the save, and Bobby and I square off. I knew Paul was bringing Bobby in to work with me, so that day I'm nervous to meet Bobby, and I'm walking back from the ring to go through the gorilla position to the back. And before the thing was changed, you had two big black curtains that you walked through. There were in between those two big black curtains to the side was an air conditioned room where like the Dudleys and Taz and the champ, all those guys dressed, and the rest of us dressed in this huge open area in the back. So as I walked through the first curtain, by the time I walked through the second curtain, I see Bobby Eaton sitting there with Paul. I immediately have to go into that other room and collect myself because I'm hyperventilating, because I'm getting ready to meet my idol. It's one of the biggest moments in my life, meeting Bobby Eaton. And then going out there and squaring off with him, that's all a blur because you kind of in the zone. And the next day, me and RVD were talking, and he said, C-Dub, he said, while you and Bobby were out there, Paul made everybody sit down and watch the monitor because he wanted the two best punchers. He wanted the boys to see the two best punchers in wrestling go at it, because I was always told I had the best punch in wrestling. And of course, Bobby does too. And RVD goes, not for nothing and no knock. He said, but your punch is so much better, which was a huge compliment from RVD. So that's probably one of my biggest moments from there, is working with Bobby, saying that I did that. And then doing the promo, if everybody ever goes back and see it, you see me kicking my feet as I'm walking up to Simon. That's my nervous tick because I'm shaking in my boots before I cut the promo.
Yeah, that is an awesome moment. You mentioned Super Crazy, and I actually had him on the list to talk about your matches with the Insane Luchador and how good those were in terms of meshing conflicting styles. I also would add that Hannibal the Death Dealer is going to face Super Crazy this coming May the 3rd in the ECW arena for the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance One and Done, and is looking to end his long career. Just wanted to get your thoughts on working with him and how that style would seem to be a clash, but you really had some bangers with him.
Yeah, it's just like the same with working with Kid Cash. It's a classic. I call it airborne versus infantry. Crazy to me is one of the best luchadors in the world. Our chemistry together from the first time we stepped in the ring was fantastic. We've always had great chemistry. I loved working with him. He loved working with me. And one of our very first matches, well, the very first time we worked was in Cincinnati, where he beat me to go to the quarterfinals of the TV belt. And I'm bleeding and my face looks like a spider web of blood. Then we did one at the arena where he Frankenstein me off the top rope to a table. And that's one of the nights I got a standing ovation. But one of my best, I want to know if my best memories, but we were in Tallahassee, Florida at Florida State. And somehow I knew that the finish, which was a moonsault off the top through a table, wasn't going to break. I even asked Spike, I said beforehand, I said, I don't think this table's going to break. I said, don't you think, we should have a different approach to this? He says, no, he said, it'll break. It'll be fine. Well, it didn't break. And when it didn't, Crazy turns the table upside down with the legs sticking up and does a moonsault off the second rope. Well, somehow I am moving the table with my arms like this and the table shifting. And as he does the moonsault, he legitimately comes through the legs like this and lands between them, almost impales himself. And it was just a perfect timing of the way the table was moving. And it's one of those you go back and look at, and it's a cringe moment. Crazy's amazing to work with. I had never had a bad match with him. we always were looking forward. We actually had a series of matches. Paul just kept putting us together every night. I'd go over, he'd go over. It was back and forth, back and forth. But he's one of those that, most of the guys I work with ECW, one of those I loved working with and would step in the ring with him today if I could.
Yeah, he's quite a talent, no doubt about it. Got a question from a fan regarding there's some anecdotal commentary out there that you had heat with the late Mike Awesome. Can you speak to that by chance?
Yeah, it was. I worked Mike quite a few times at ECW, and my very first time working with him, he got lost. He can't remember the match. Every time I worked with him, he couldn't remember the match, and that wasn't where the heat started. The heat actually started was years later. We were in Japan working. We were there for 0-1, but there was also a Hustle show coming on. Hustle was a pay-per-view where they brought UFC guys in, everybody from Japan, different promotions all worked together, but we always worked as different characters. I worked as a snow monster called the Great Samu, which was an ice character. My character was the first thing to ever make it snow inside an arena. So I got that, on my belt. But we're walking through Roppongi, and if you don't know, Roppongi is exactly like Times Square in New York, but it's only cleaner, way more people. And myself and Steve Carino and Low Key and Brian Kendrick Spanky were all walking. It's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we see Mike Awesome coming towards us. Mike Awesome was a known smoker, and you could tell he was smoked up by the way he was walking, and he had glasses on. 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, this fool had glasses on. So he comes up to Steve, high fives him, hugs him. Now, mind you, we're working at MLW as well. He's our champion, and we're at MLW as well. So not only have I worked him dozens of times at ECW, but had run-ins with him at MLW. He comes up to Steve, hugs Steve. What's going on, man? Great to see you. Hugs him. Same thing with Low Key, high fives, hugs him. He had never met Kendrick. Well, I can't remember if it was Spanky or Low Key he hadn't never met, but the one he hadn't met, he shook his hand. Hey, man, Mike Awesome, such an honor to meet you. For now, it's going to be Spanky. He looks at me to high five and goes, hey, man. And Carino, who's kind of been drinking, leans over my shoulder and goes, he doesn't know who you are. So that just kind of pissed me off. It's because I was a hothead. And I go, Mike, it's CW Anderson. Yeah, CW. What's up, man? And he still didn't know who I was. So the rest of that tour, I was on his ass, giving him heat for that. And that's where it just kind of started and ran with all these years. And of all the people, you don't know who I am. So the day I found out he passed away, and again, this has been, 20 years ago maybe since this happened, a little less, different person now. I called Carino because I found out Mike Awesome had died. And I said, hey, man, did you hear the news? He goes, no. I said, Mike Awesome died. He goes, really? I go, yeah. Steve says, how? I said, he hung himself. Steve goes, wow. I went, yeah, I can't believe he didn't fuck that up too.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, it was Steph. It was I was such an ass back then to an extent, but at the time I felt like I was justified. And back then, Steve and I had something called the list way before Jericho ever had it. Steve and I had the list, and the only way you got off that list was to die. So Mike also, that was a big win for me because he got off my list.
Well, that's one way. Lewis is asking, you just mentioned MLW, and we're going to have a question about the Extreme Horsemen there, but how did MLW compare in the early days to ECW? Might as well get it in now. The Extreme Horsemen versus Team Funk was one of my favorite War Games matches ever. I would concur with that. So big multi-part question there, but also
thank you, Lewis.
When you answer that, how was it? I know you've competed in War Games matches numerous times. What was that like for you?
To answer the first question, to me, there wasn't much difference between ECW and MLW as far as the locker room, the guys, the atmosphere that was going out, the wrestling. It was kind of the same. We were, because there was some guys from ECW. There was newer guys that were coming in: Sanjay Dutt, CM Punk, Michael Shane, And then we had the influx of the Japanese guys with Kojima. Then you had the luchador guys with La Parca, guys like that. So there wasn't much difference, only that MLW was the hybrid, bringing in the lucha and make it prominent. The War Games, that was my very first War Games. And it was an honor to be able to say that I worked with Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Terry Funk, and Dusty Rhodes. I had a program with them, and unfortunately, all three of those are not with us anymore. So working with those guys was such an honor. Living out childhood dreams with that, and War Games was a lot of fun. The setup for it was a lot of fun. Being at MLW, going down to Florida all the time was great. I was really sad. It was like I went into a depression spell when ECW folded because I had worked so long to make it, and then it was yanked away from me right as the time my brass ring was coming, which was the TV belt and the contract. MLW was up running. They were the new hot thing going, and then all of a sudden they're closed. So again, that was another thing that was taken from me. I missed working with them. I have a funny story working with Dr. Death was huge in Japan. He was known for being stiff, a shooter, a tough ass, a badass. So the very first time I worked with him was a tag with BJ. My name is drawing a blank right now. It was Dr. Death and BJ against me and Simon. And Carino hyped us up because he goes, CW, Dr. Death, man, he's a shooter. He's stiff in Japan. You know how it is, because this one Japan was still strong style while we were over there. He says, you're going to have to bring it. You got to lay it in, because if you don't lay it in over there, you're getting it back. So he hopped me and Simon up, and I was like, Simon, we're going to do this, man. We're going to put it in there, let Dr. Death know that, we're there with him. So we go out, start working Dr. Death, and we're clubbing him like a seal. And he's taking it, and his first few punches back are like getting hit by Jimmy Valiant. He's barely touching us. And I went, oh, shit, we just got ribbed. So we actually beat the hell out of Dr. Death in the beginning. And after the match was over, he beats us back, and he's holding the side of his head as we're coming back. And he goes, God damn it, Steve, your boys beat the shit out of me. It's what it was. Steve had ribbed us. And we're basically on our knees apologizing to him that we were so sorry. We didn't mean anything by it, because we didn't want him to beat the shit out of us for real. So I felt so bad, but I think Steve got a great laugh off of that he ribbed it, and we actually followed through with it.
Yeah, another legend gone too soon. Our mutual friend that you referenced earlier, Angels, talked about his experience working with New Jack in ECW. A fan, of course. Every ECW interview he comes up. What a legend, what a figure. Wanted to ask about your experience with him in the ring, as well as any amusing or otherwise backstage memories.
Yeah, I got a few stories about Jack. Angel got to work with him a lot more than I did at ECW, and I'm a little bit jealous of that because Jack and I worked later on the indies and stuff like that. But Jack and I were very close, like brothers, up until the day he passed away. In fact, he texted me a week before he passed away asking if I had finished his book. I still am in contact with his wife, checking on her, because to me, she's my sister. And she would tell me repeatedly how much Jack cared about me. I knew Jack was close to me, but I didn't know how much he loved me until Jen told me. But the very first interaction I had with Jack, as far as actually meeting him, was we're in Dothan, Alabama. And at the time I was dating this light-skinned mocha girl named Lisa, who everybody from ECW knew who Lisa was, because she's actually featured in one of the video games, because she's an unlockable character. Jack was talking to her before the show started, and we go in the back, and we're walking down this long hallway, and Jack goes, as we're coming to each other, Jack goes, C-Dub, man, I didn't know you were from North Carolina. I was like, yeah, I'm from Raleigh. He said, man, I'm from Greensboro. He goes, I didn't know you dated black girls. I said, it's kind of all I date. He goes, man, I only date white girls. And as we passed, we kind of high-five and kept it moving. So we kind of clicked after that. And then I would, anytime Jack would get hurt or couldn't drive himself, I would drive him and take him, to the show and take care of him at night. I remember one night he give me and one of this guy, Jack Dupp, that was part of the Dupps. His name's Mike Howell. We're all sitting in the hotel room in Philadelphia. And Jack gave me and Lisa and Mike this little pill, and I couldn't feel my legs the rest of the night. But he starts telling his side of the mass transit incident. And I remember Mike leaning over to me and goes, "I would run away, but I can't feel my feet." So we're in St. Louis. We're in Missouri one night, driving to St. Louis for a show. And that's the night, the next day is when the infamous tornado come through when we're at the hotel. And as we're riding, because Jack got hurt at the show before, so I'm in Jack's little Mitsubishi Eclipse driving him to St. Louis. Now, those things are tiny. And Jack's passed out in the passenger seat, and it's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm driving him. And out there, it's nothing but flat and cornfields. And off in the distance, it had to be a 20, 30-foot cross burning, just in the middle of the night, just burning. And I was like, this can't be happening. So I nudged Jack a couple times and said, he finally comes up out of his stupor. I said, "Jack, what do you think about that?" And he looks over at it. And he goes, "Oh, shit." He goes, "Keep driving, CW, keep driving." And he just passes right back out. The day that I found out he passed away, Mike Keener texted me. And I was sitting right here on my couch. And I had a 200-pound Rottweiler that was dying from cancer. And he was laying over here, and he could barely move. And Mike texts me, and he goes, "We just lost Jack." No, he goes, "Jack's gone." That was his message. I said, "Jack who? Where'd he go?" He said, "New Jack. He just died." I started crying because Jack and I were so tight. And I remember my Rottweiler getting up and lumbering over to me and laying his head in my lap because he was consoling me. And about a few months later, because that was the spring when he passed away, Brian Hawks, who helps run AML here in the Carolinas, and they're also the people that run WrestleCade, he wanted to do a tribute to Jack because Jack would always come to AML for no money and hang out. He would come to some of the outside shows for the training and just hang out. So Brian got close to him as well. He wanted to do a tribute to New Jack. And he messaged me. He says, "During the Battle Royal, I want you to be New Jack. I want you to come out to his music and do his stuff. Would you do it?" And I said, "Absolutely, but let me message Jen, his wife, and get permission from her." So I messaged her, and she responded immediately. She says, "I can't think of anybody better to pay tribute to Jerome than you." So you can go on. I think it's on my YouTube, and you can search it where I pay a tribute to him. And before I walked out that night, there was the Battle Royal was going on, and I knew my spot was coming up, and they just had Hornswoggle come out as Sandman with his music. And right before when Jack's music hit, that big whistle, that siren, I look up and I went, "You got me, right, big bruh?" And the rest of it was a blur. And I came in the back, and John Schuyler, who works with TNA, who's Jack, Schuyler and I are really close. He goes, "That was fucking awesome." And I just collapsed on him and started crying. Sorry, it just, it's been a couple years and it still hurts. So,
well,
yeah.
that's a very, very touching tribute that the fans should definitely check out. I wanted to ask you though about your never-ending epic. I'd be remiss to not talk about your feud with Tommy Dreamer, and whether that really one of the, in terms of latter year ECW, that I Quit match that you had on pay-per-view from the Hammerstein Ballroom, was that the highlight? And I know you've wrestled him since, but would you consider that to be the highlight of that program? And again, another guy that you had really discernible chemistry with.
Yeah. The I Quit match is definitely the thing I'm the infamous for and the most known for, and that is my highlight. They say, "What's your favorite match?" Is that. Who's your favorite opponent? Tommy's right there. It was Tommy's idea, one of his ideas, to make me my very first dark match, which is one I mentioned earlier, where Bill and I against Danny and Roadkill and Lita. Tommy pulled me to the side and goes, because Tommy was in the little traveling clique we were in. He says, "I'm giving you this dark match, not only because you're my friend, but because you're a hell of a wrestler." He says, "I want you to go out there had the best match, steal the show. I don't give a damn if it's the dark match. He said, because I want the people to see this match so you can stick it up the asses of those at WCW that says you weren't worth a contract for. My match with Kid Cash at November to Remember 2000, I come in the back and Tommy walks by me and goes, that was a hell of a match. He says, CW, you're a great wrestler and I can't wait to put you over on pay-per-view. And that's kind of our feud was starting there a little bit. And Massacre was the next pay-per-view where I beat him when I spine busted him through the table with the legs up. The time the table was upside down and the legs were sticking up. And then the I Quit match. I was told the I Quit matches would be hard to do. I've had a couple guys that were telling me they were really hard to pull off. And, we hope you have a good one. Well, crazy that the I Quit match was January 7th, 2001, my 30th birthday. So not only did I get to have the best match that I've ever had, to me, it was on my 30th birthday, and you can go back and look at it. And there was a guy in the front row that was giving me shit when I walked out. And you see me lean down and throw my arms out to the side. And what I said to him is, how are you going to give me hell on my birthday? And he started laughing and clapping. He was like, you the man, C-Dub. Tommy told me before the match, he goes, if we have a good match, I'm going to shake your hand. If not, then we'll go from there. So my driving force was to get that handshake. We didn't even start putting the match together until the show started. The finish was supposed to be barbed wire wrapped around where you saw the band and the thing. That was supposed to be barbed wire, but somebody had taken the barbed wire off the truck before the show, before they went up to New York. So Chilly Willie, who was a student of mine, who everybody knows who Chilly Willie was, and Lou was walking around downtown Manhattan trying to find barbed wire, and we could never find it. We did find it on somebody's fence, and when it was getting close for the show started, so we kind of hustle back and tell the musketeer, hey, barbed wire, go down this many streets, take a left, barbed wire's right there, cut it off and bring it back, no problem. He comes back maybe 45 minutes later in a bag, says, I got your barbed wire. We pull it out, and this fool had brought back razor wire. Oh. So I had no idea. I said, and it was all rusty and bent up. And I said, you're not putting that across my damn face. So he made a circle, a big round thing out of it. And he said, well, you can just spine buster me on it. So that's where we did a spine buster spot. But I love the fact that, for 20 something years later and people still talk about that I Quit match. It lets me know that, I give the fans something memorable for that night.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% on that. One of the questions I got the most, actually, you worked, another guy I've had the pleasure of interviewing, Jack Victory, on the final, what I understand, ECW event in 2001. Was that something that, I mean, guys had different interpretations of what was, some didn't know that it was going to be the end, some did. Were you in the camp that you thought that Paulie was going to come back from Los Angeles with that better TV deal, or was it a shock for you as well?
It was a shock. I was in denial. I thought Paul would save us. There's been so many allegations against Paul with that, whether he was out there trying to save us or filming the movie Rollerball. Years later, I got heat with him, and that was he and I got this little Twitter beef because I did an interview where I said that, and now it's allegedly he did that. Allegedly he supposedly was out there. Allegedly he was supposed to be saving us. No one would ever know, but I did not know that. I thought that was told for me from people that were higher up than I was, that was happening. But it's whatever. The ECW is still folded. I was under the belief that ECW can't go out of business. It's ECW. Somebody is going to save us. Yeah. And we had no idea. Paul never told us that we were done. There was the rumors, and how we found out that ECW was done was the night he showed up on, I think it was Raw, commentating with Jim Ross. I saw him commentating, and it was like I just got punched in the gut. That's how we found out. He wasn't man enough to tell us face to face that we were done. There was the rumors and everybody was saying it, but a lot of us chose not to believe it. I always thought it'd be saved. And working with Jack Victory, Jack and I are still close to even to today. We text each other every week or so. He actually drove from Tallahassee up to here for my wedding in September because my wife absolutely adores Jack. And if he didn't come, I think she would have murdered him. So that's how close she is to Jack. Um, but that was one of the low points in my life, was when ECW folded, because I worked so hard to make it in this business, and I was, like I said before, I was right there to take that next level, and was snatched away from me.
Yeah, which kind of segues into the whole WWE ECW thing. You were on One Night Stand. You were featured in the crowd, and then you in 2006 had a run with them. I'm always interested to find out, in your view, was that something that Vince McMahon was going to really embrace? Did you think that when you were there? I know other guys had different views, or was it designed in your estimation to kind of kill that legacy that can't be killed, really, of the original?
We all had the hopes that Vince would embrace it because it could have made him a lot of money. We thought we would stay in the small arenas like before. And that's the only reason I signed, was we were promised that Paul and Tommy were in control. Vince had nothing to do with it. So that's why a lot of us signed. A lot of us signed for like shit money, which was $35,000 a year. That's all we signed for. And that's paying your own hotel, rental, the whole 9 yards. The only thing they paid for was your flight. So we were under the impression that was going to happen. And after the first ECW arena show where I worked Sabu, Vince took it over, and it was hell from then on out. It became a Disney version of what it could have been. Actually, the One Night Stand, the one you saw me sitting in the crowd, I was supposed to wrestle on that one. I was supposed to be opening match with me and Swinger against Danny and Roadkill. And then it got moved to a dark match. Then it got moved to a singles with me in a dark match. And then I got cut because Vince didn't want to kill the crowd with the dark match. He wanted them live and hype. So, obviously he's never really paid attention to ECW because it wouldn't have mattered. So I got asked I could either sit in the crowd and watch the show or hang out in the back until the big fight in the end came. So I decided to sit out in the crowd. But once Vince took it over, when we were there, none of us wanted to be there. None of the lower guys did anyway. Francine and I would always look for an out. If we weren't on the show, which most of the times we weren't, we'd try to get out of there and go to the next town. It was miserable. I was usually a 1 week on, 1 week off guy. And near the end, I hurt my back working Kevin Thorne in Oklahoma City. And I told myself I was done because they didn't look at me like the CW Anderson from ECW. That night I worked Kevin. Dean Malenko looks at Kevin after the match and says, Kevin, you're way up here on our mindset with ECW and everything. CW is way down here. You got to bring him up to your level. And nothing against Kevin, who I think the world of, but Kevin wasn't wrestling that long. I was a lot better, but I was never really given that chance. I had the one match on TV with Punk, and that was it. So the day Johnny Ace called me, which was January 17th of 2007, I think it was, when he told me they were letting me go, I was like, thank God. I said, can I go back to Japan? He said, yeah, you just can't go to TNA for 90 days. I said, yep, that won't be a problem. I was so glad to get out of that place. It was a miserable experience.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus of most of the original ECW guys. But in terms of the phenomenon that we saw with tribute shows, reunion shows, I know you were on Hardcore Homecoming, you worked Extreme Rising, and then you had a great match on the TNA Hard Justice against Scorpio. What were you thinking, or what's your opinion of those reunion shows that tried to capture and rekindle that original ECW spirit? Do you think that is a more fitting venue than the WWE experiment?
Absolutely. Those that, when they do these reunion shows and things, the best thing to me about it is I get to see my second family. That is the absolute best thing. It's not so much the wrestling and all the other things, but getting to see all those guys and spend 1 or 2 days with them, because even today we are still family. I saw them not too long ago at I see them at WrestleCade and things like that. But when I did the show over the last WrestleMania and I worked with Shane Douglas and Franny, everybody was there. People I hadn't seen in years. And I love seeing them. And all of us, we pick right back up. We're still like little kids when we get to see each other and hang out. I love the show because you get to wrestle with those same guys again. It's like old times again. So every time they do one, I'm so looking forward to it just to see everybody. That's how I feel, because I wasn't dreading that like I was going to WWE because of how just that company is or was in general at the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You mentioned that you worked CM Punk, and I know you had a high-profile match with him in the first ROH anniversary show. You later teamed with him, but I want to do a two-part question here. You also worked John Cena in 2001 in UPW. I wanted to know, based on those early matches that you had with those two, if you saw, the future Hall of Fame careers that each of them certainly went on to have.
With Punk, I didn't see him having the impact that he does with, the pipe bomb promo from there on out and everything he did at WWE, as transcending the figure as he was. Always a great talker, always a great wrestler, but I never would have thought he would have had the impact he did. With Cena had that it factor because he had that look. He had the charisma, the promo, the skills. Again, you don't never see that kind of impact that those two had on this business. They can wrestle, they can talk on the mic, but you never see that thing coming with that. You can never predict they're going to have that kind of career. You can think that, but no. But as far as in the ring with them, yeah, they had all the skills and mindset of what it takes to make it in this business. Just nobody never sees it getting to that level. If you say you did, you're lying. You can't, because they have such a profound impact on this business that they can't take away from that, which I'm happy about. I was happy for John and happy for Punk. They both had that because that's what they were going for. But they're both, in my opinion, great guys. Enjoyed being in the ring with them, and so happy they did have that impact because, in their own way, they changed wrestling in their own way.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we ask about your current team with one Brock Anderson, we have a fan question here asking about how you feel about the pro wrestling product today, and would you consider producer agent role in one of the big promotions? And I guess that's in addition to WWE, AEW.
I'm quite content in the life I have now with my job and everything that I do. Would I consider it? Absolutely. It had to be a substantial amount of money to make me uproot and do that, because I have a pretty good life right now, with what I do. The state of wrestling, no, I personally don't like it, with how, you got one place where guys don't think they need to be taught, they need to be critiqued. They think they do nothing wrong. They don't sell anything. They don't do any of that. I don't think that is wrestling. That's cosplay. That's entertainment of gymnastics. Are the guys talented? 100%. Are they more athletic and talented than me? 100%. But telling a story is professional wrestling. It's good versus evil. It's black and white. It's, good guy, bad guy. The bad guy wears the black cowboy hat. The good guy wears the white hat. It still works. Look at the last WrestleMania and their pay-per-view, contrasting pay-per-views of what the draws were and the storyline from what Cody winning the belt to what they were putting out. You tell me which one had a better impact on wrestling and that the fans were talking about more. Does the one company have their own little niche audience? Absolutely. Just like we did at ECW. We had, a lot of people don't like what we did, and that's fine. That's their own taste. Everybody has the right to bury me and say I ain't good and all these things. The guys that have made it in this business, Cornette's podcast, Eric Bischoff's podcast, Vince Russo, they all have the right to say what they want about me and everybody else because they've done something in this business. And the guys that take offense to that, that's on you. But I like the way wrestling's going? No, it's going to end up before somebody gets killed with the way things and the extent these guys do these stunts, because that's what they are, stunts. Because they go out there and do some of these things, one that I can't do, and then what is that left for somebody like me? But again, wrestling is storytelling, and it's not going to change. And you can go back and tell a story, and fans are going to believe that, because that's what fans want to do. Fans want to get away from their shitty life because life sucks, and they want to go and be entertained for 2 and 3 hours and get immersed in a story, just like they do movies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. Circling back to your team with Brock, that seems to be that's a full circle sort of thing. That's a natural team progression for him. How did that come together for you and him? And I understand you had a different experience with Arn when you got to meet and know him a little bit than you did Ole.
Yeah, like talking about 180 degrees. With the promotion I work for here every month in the Carolinas, AML, I can't say enough great things about them. I've been with them 10, 11 years now. And Tracy Myers and Brian Hawks, again, they run a fantastic WrestleCade. If you've never been to WrestleCade, it's one of those weekend experiences you need to come and enjoy. Working with them, they had an idea of doing something with Brock and Arn because Lodi, who was my student, trained Brock. He was Brock's trainer. So I would go down to Lodi's school and work out with Brock. And I don't know if it was Brian or me that pitched it first to where of tagging and doing something with Brock and Arn. But it's one of those things that just makes too much sense not to happen. And at the time, the guy I was tagging with, Preston Quinn, they brought Brock in to do some 6-mans with us. And we had some great 6-mans. And then it got where Arn had mentioned to Tracy Myers about he wanting Brock to tag with me, to learn under me. So he asked, would I be interested in that? What am I going to say? No, of course. I want to tag with Brock. What a great way to bookend my career, starting as an Anderson and then, helping the next generation of Anderson progress. So I absolutely agreed to it. And they had a thing to bring Brock in and Arn in to work at AML. We were the tag champs for 7-8 months that we just lost to the Dawsons recently. And into the MLW thing coming along, but I love tagging with Brock. I love mentoring him. He's a great guy. He's a sponge, and he gets his smarts, honestly, because Arn's so smart to this business. One of the first 6-mans, for instance, we're going over something, and I put a spot in there for Arn, and it was near the end, and I asked him what he thought about this. He made the smallest change to it that made the biggest difference, that got a larger pop and a larger reaction from the fans than it ever would if it had done it my way. And it was just a small change. And when he walked off, I looked up at Brock and Preston, and I go, I don't know a damn thing about wrestling. 31 years I've been in this, and Arn makes a small change, and it makes a huge difference. But I love tagging with Brock. I can't say that enough, and love Arn being right there, because he has the knowledge to tell us things that he doesn't like or likes, the things to work on. And then Brock's attitude or way to take this is, I can tell him things, as he calls Arn the old man, that the old man can't, because he has to be a coach or he has to be dad. He can't be both. And I have the way of telling him, that sucked. Let's work on this. Let's do this. Let's do these things, because my job, one, is to make this business better than I left it. And two, to make sure that I leave the Anderson name in good hands with him. And it's already headed that way. We've been tagging together for a year, and he is leaps and bounds better than what he was when we started tagging together. Even his promo, I even noticed it when we were in Dallas last week, when he was talking to Paul Walter Hauser. Just him on the mic live has gotten so much better. He's so much more comfortable with it now. So I'm looking forward to what's coming over the next however long he and I tag together, because it's been a lot of fun. Because this is my 31st year in wrestling. I just turned 54 last week. I know I'm on the tail end of my career, and like I said, it's a great way to bookend it. I can call it quits and be happy this time. The last time I tried retiring was because of a failure in my marriage, and tried committing suicide, and I was in a bad place. But the woman I have in my life and tagging with Brock and Arn I'm at the best place in my life I could be right now, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, and you certainly, I'm certainly excited about that team, and man, the guy's got the genetics. He's got all kinds of potential. I think it's great that you're helping him on. But CW, we're just about at the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you the question, and I mean, we've scratched the surface and a lot of things, didn't talk about Japan, but you've had one hell of a career, made a major footprint that will be forever on this business. What if, and this is a tough question, but if you had to boil down your proudest accomplishment in wrestling, what would that be?
Probably as far as my accomplishment is the I Quit match. I want fans to remember, if they do remember me, as the guy that always, when I say I give it 100%, 110%, that's what I do. I don't want fans ever leaving a show saying that CW Anderson didn't give them their money's worth, because you never know who's going to be seeing me for the first time. And I told Johnny Swinger one night, I was watching a match with two guys wrestle, and they were two older guys, and you could tell it wasn't what it used to be. And I never want fans to say CW Anderson doesn't have it anymore, because I wouldn't be doing the business or my last name as an Anderson justice. So as long as I can still go and still keep at a high level, I'm still going to do it, because I love this business. I love entertaining and love making fans enjoy that they've spent their money. And at least one day when I hang up my boots, they can say that CW Anderson, that guy was the word professional wrestler.
Where can the fans find you on social media, or promote anything that you have upcoming?
Next weekend, I'm in Winston-Salem at the Benton Convention Center for War Games. There's a War Games match. Brock and I, this is our first year not doing War Games, but I always come out and watch AML. They run every month. The week after, my wife and I will be in Disney. So we're Disney heads, as you can tell by the shirt. Then February 7th or 8th, I can't remember, but it's that weekend. Brock and I are back with MLW, which we enjoy, love. We love working with MLW. We'll be in Atlanta at Center Stage. Everything you can find me on Instagram, X, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. Now that TikTok's back online, is at ECW Anderson. You message me, I will respond. It might take a few hours. It might even take a day, especially because of me searching spam folders, but I will respond to you. And I thank everyone, who has watched this tonight and has enjoyed my career. And I always say this before, whether you loved me or you hated me, I appreciate you keeping your hands high for C-Dub.
Well, thank you very much for your time, CW. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and we'll keep in touch, because we just might see you in Great North Wrestling in the future. But fans, that's it for this edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast here on the ever-growing Hannibal TV on YouTube. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification, and you won't miss great content like this. For Mr. CW Anderson, I'm Jack Kilby.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates.